to understand the dysfunction of Western civilization, or really any civilization, you know, mass society, I think that we have to understand what I would consider to be a much more natural evolutionary state of being. Because as long as you're inside of mass society, you're going to be defending some aspect of it, you know, in a defensive manner. As long as you think that survival is dependent on that set of economic and technological arrangements. And so if you look back at the history of humanity, or if you look at what's left of indigenous people, you quickly come to understand that human beings evolved to live in small, what we call human scale, for a good reason, small groups of people, face-to-face communication, knowing where they're getting their food, education through experience, through the experience of the culture and the experience of going to get food and finding food and preparing food, and the experience of the biosphere and the local ecology and the trees and the birds and the rhythms of nature. The experience of language springing from the earth. The experience of being in close communion with other people. The experience of encountering other groups of people who are foreign, and having the experience of a lateral experience, you know, lateral communion, rather than some kind of imperialistic, top-down, militaristic relationship to other people, or the kind of separation from other people that one has living in an urban area, where all this kind of people live over here and those kind of people live over there, and you don't ever encounter the other. We've come so far from that, you know, that people have literally forgotten, because, you know, it's almost as if we are made to understand our survival through what's in front of us. And so if you think your survival has to do with going to the supermarket and having a car and watching TV and using your cell phone, then, you know, and you're right in that situation, but that's not the big view. You know, that the big view is that survival has always been given to human beings through an unmediated participation in the natural world. And so it's also very interesting to note that the kind of mental health problems that exist today, and I think that they're all based on some form of dissociation. It just kind of depends on where that gets sliced in the personality. So one of the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder is a split. I mean, it's really all about a trauma occurring, whether it's a single trauma like a car accident or an ongoing trauma like living in mass society, that is too much for the nervous system to handle. It overwhelms the nervous system. And so the nervous system, rather than taking in the experience, processing it in a normal way, and putting it in memory, it can't be done. It's too much. And so the nervous system splits the experience, and throws part of it into consciousness, and part of it into repression, and part of it into the body, and part of it into the nervous system, and like that. And so you get perhaps a verbal memory, a narrative of what took place, but without the feeling state. Or you might remember aspects of what took place, but not the totality of it. Or you might remember who was there, but not where it was. Or you might have eruptions of feeling states that don't seem to be related to anything. Or you might have it all buried in your body and have illness that are expressing it. And so that's really the core definition of what starts, what launches the process of post-traumatic stress disorder. Some of the symptoms are, it can be an extreme numbing. It's just all too much, and we're going to keep the stuff in repression, and so we're just going to numb ourselves out, which of course is one of the major symptoms that exists in mass society. I always remember the time that I was invited to go to New York City to give a lecture and be in a play, and so I arrived at night, took a cab to this apartment, and I got up the next morning, and I came out, and no one was there, and so I was all by myself. And I walked down the street, and I started saying hello to people. So hello to the garbage man, hello to the postman, hello to all the people walking by, and by the time I got to the corner, I was exhausted. And that night, so I stopped. And that night, I told my hosts what had happened, and they said, "Oh, well, everyone thought you were crazy." Well, the deal is that in my village in New Mexico, you would be considered to be crazy if you didn't say hello to everyone you passed. And so that, it's almost like to make it through mass society, to make it through all that onslaught that is way too much for the system to handle, that you have to numb yourself off from that. Fragmentation is also the experience of trauma. Like I was saying, some gets into repression and some goes into the nervous system, and some is in memory but not entirely, and so there's this incredible fragmentation that takes place. And it's really curious to me that mass society itself is a fragmented entity. Well, the steel comes from over here, and then you have a car over here, but you never see where the steel comes from or where it's smelted, or so you go to the market and you buy the food here, and it was trucked in from 3,000 miles away or 10,000 miles away, or it was grown over here, but it was packaged here or canned or processed, and the chemicals came from over here, and like I was saying, the city is like, well, here's the upper middle class lives here, and then here's the ghetto, and here's the freeway, and here's where the business takes place, and here's where the chi-chi boutiques are, and here's the park, and and so it's all fragmented, and how can anyone even figure out what this is?